Hi folks, Kevin Dodson coming to you here once again from Carolina Firearms Training and Gun Sales Incorporated. Today is Wednesday, April the 19th, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through segment 9 on my series of concealed carry as it pertains to the state of North Carolina. So segment 9 we're going to cover, and this will be probably a fairly short video because there's two parts here. One is escalation of force, and that's what we're mainly going to talk about. And then the next thing we'll move on to is prohibited carry areas. Now, the nice thing about the prohibited carry areas is ever since October 2013, there are now more areas that you can carry than ever before, as to where you used to couldn't carry. In these areas, you now can. Like, for instance, places that charge admission and restaurants that serve alcohol. Of course, you can't drink, when you go in there, but you can go in there with a handgun concealed, with a concealed carry permit. But in segment 9 here, we're going to talk about escalation of force, and this is on page 18 in the red book. Escalation of force, and I'll read this paragraph here, and then I'll go in and explain it to you. Escalation of force is merely the increase in the level of force based on that force that is used against you. Force must be proportionate to the level of force used against you. For instance, if you are verbally assaulted, you cannot use deadly force to settle the argument. If we were to look at the various levels of force, the escalation would look something like this. And I'll go through that just in a minute. It looks sort of like a ladder, if you will, starting with the least amount of force to deadly force. But of course, I'm not going to call any names, but I did have a gentleman in my class, it's probably been a couple of months ago now, that when I got to my PowerPoint slide that said that deadly force is not allowed for the use of violent language in North Carolina. Now, I don't think any state's going to allow deadly force for the use of violent language, but he raised his hand, and of course the class laughed at him. I couldn't help that, but he said, so you're telling me that if somebody gets up in my face and cusses at me, that I can't shoot them? And of course, sir, that's exactly what I'm telling you. Of course, like I said, class laughed at him, and I couldn't help that, but that's just how absurd it was. I'd like to think that he would know better than that with not even knowing the law on that, okay? Your common sense would tell you that it doesn't sound reasonable. Does it sound reasonable that it would tick you off? Sure, but not to the point that you would use deadly force, okay? Well, his school of thought on that was totally different than what the state of North Carolina's law is on that, okay? Well, at least he left my class at the end of the day knowing what the law was on that. So getting back to the escalation of force, so all they're saying is this. In other words, we have force continuum at the police department that I work at. Every agency has its force continuum, or its use of force rules and so forth. When you can use deadly force, when you can use a taser, when it's appropriate to use a collapsible baton, OC spray, things like that. Well, even for civilians, there's something similar to that you should know. So all this says is that it starts out with physical presence, two individuals that oppose each other, okay? Maybe one's really bigger than the other, and that's all it takes for maybe somebody to back down, right? And then you have verbal. So that means that, all right, we have physical presence. It's going further than that. It's now verbal. That means that two individuals are cussing at each other, calling each other names, things like that. Maybe not necessarily making threats. Well, they could be making threats. Of course, they go to the magistrate's office and take a warrant out on them for making threats. But the threats with no action to follow it, in other words, I'm getting ready to kill you, but no action behind it, is just a threat alone, right? Okay, you still can't use deadly force at that point. Then we have soft hands. So soft hands just simply means that somebody has laid hands on you, right? And I don't mean that they're praying for you, anything like that. They have laid hands on you. They have touched you in some fashion. And typically soft hands is going to be maybe a grab, maybe a shove or something like that, pulling on and so forth. And then we have hard hands. Now, hard hands means, once again, they have laid hands on you, right? But hard hands is anything physical. Typically, hard hands is going to be slaps, punches, kicks, things like that. Then we have chemical mace, OC spray. Now, the one thing I like about this is it is an option to using deadly force, okay? Of course, that's the last thing we want to do is use deadly force. However, to hesitate to use it when we should could get us hurt or killed. But OC spray is a great option. You know, our daughter went to UNCG for 5 years, and she carried a bottle of OC spray. They have university police there, and that's wonderful. But once again, you know, the police can't be everywhere all the time, okay? So it made us feel a little bit better knowing that she had a can of OC spray in her hands. That stuff's usually effective out to about 15 feet. We sell in our store the ballistic stream. They make a fogger, a foam, and a ballistic stream. The fogger, I don't like that because, you know, typically you're outside when you deploy this stuff, and the least bit of downwind, if you're downwind, and you're going to get some indirect exposure, okay, and it's not going to be very pleasant. The foam is just downright nasty, okay? It's just like shaving cream, and you know, and of course, if we spray someone on duty, you know, the next thing we're supposed to do is to decontaminate them. That's why we carry a quart-sized bottle of water in our patrol cars to simply decontaminate them with plain old H2O, plain old water, okay? But don't discount OC spray to get out of a situation without having to use deadly force. Of course, you spray someone, you know, the next thing you should run, right? Probably should call the police if it's gotten to that point where you spray somebody with OC spray to file a report. But we run because you don't want to stick around, because if that bad guy can still get their hands on you, they don't have to see you to hurt you, okay? So you get away from them. You create distance between you and that individual. Next thing would be impact weapons. You know, a flashlight, a collapsible baton, or what have you. It's another option to using deadly force to get somebody off of you. Now, if you strike somebody in the head with a collapsible baton or a flashlight, even if you don't kill them, that is still considered deadly force. You've applied deadly force. Remember, in my classes, the definition of deadly force is simply this. It's nowhere in this red book. The definition of deadly force is simply this. It's any force that is likely to cause serious bodily harm or death. So if it causes serious bodily harm, you have applied deadly force. Now, if we need to apply deadly force, we hit them in the head. I mean, if it's a deadly force situation, right? Say I don't have a gun to get to, or my knife, which shame on you if you don't have your firearm with you, but you know what I'm saying. And then, of course, the last thing is deadly force. And all they're saying here is that you never know when it's going to go from physical presence or an argument to the next thing you know, if somebody's pulling a gun out on you or pulling a knife out on you, then it immediately goes to deadly force, right? So you never know, but they just want you to know, and I can tell you this force continuum, if you will, it doesn't follow these steps, okay? It may start down at the bottom and go all the way to deadly force, or it may start at the bottom, go somewhere in the middle, go back down to the bottom, and then finish up at deadly force. You never know. So even you don't actually have a use of force policy in your hand issued by the state of North Carolina. They want you to have a little bit of a working knowledge on how use of force works. So in other words, if they cuss you out, you don't. The answer to that is you don't pull a gun out, okay, and shoot them with it. And remember, I always say, if you judge everything by the standard of reasonableness, you just simply ask yourself, before you use deadly force or any kind of force, whatever it is you're getting ready to do to this person to defend yourself, you ask yourself this simple question: does it sound reasonable? That what I'm fixing to do to you, does it sound reasonable because of what you're doing or threatening to do to me? Because if it doesn't sound reasonable, then it's probably not the right decision. If it overwhelmingly sounds reasonable, then it's probably the right decision. Okay, we're going to stop right here. The next thing, segment 10, is going to cover prohibited carry areas, which in North Carolina, there's not a whole lot of them. So, remember our website, CarolinaFirearmsTraining.com. My YouTube channel is KDodd357. Appreciate it if you would like the video and, more importantly, subscribe to my videos. I will finish up this series on concealed carry, and then I'll start doing product reviews and things like that on guns and other products in our store and things like that. So our store number is 919-708-5475. Our address is 1606 Westover Drive, Sanford, NC 27330. Till next time, be safe.